Here we are on top of DHAYAH Fort, which has a long history, starting in the late Bronze Age. That means more or less 3,500 years ago. There must have been already a fortification in the late Bronze Age. We are finding pottery shards of this period on the top of this fort. It was later used in the Iron Age, which we can see on a lot of walls, which you can see on the flanks of the mountain, and then DHAYAH Fort was used as a fortification more or less until the 19th or the beginning of the 20th century. What you see now is the rebuild of DHAYAH Fort after 1820, after it was destroyed by the British after their attack in 1819, 1820. And actually in this period of time, DHAYAH Fort played a very interesting role, because DHAYAH Fort was the last point of resistance against the British attacks. The British needed some days to overcome the defenses in Ras al-Khayma, but then they occupied Ras al-Khayma, and a lot of people and a lot of warriors fled to DHAYAH, knowing that this fort, which is on a hill of nearly 70 meters, was a very, very good place to stay, because it was very easy to defend and very difficult to attack. And the British had these problems. They came with their troops to DHAYAH Fort and couldn't do anything. The fort down, which we saw, the mud brick fort, they easily took after a very short time. The people gave up because there were mostly women and children in the fort. And of course the British said, okay, you can leave, we don't want to have nothing against women and children. So they left and they occupied the fort. But the upper one, they couldn't reach. The cannons the British brought, the field cannons, were no help because they couldn't shoot 70 meters up. So at the end the British had to bring the largest cannon from the frigate, and this was quite an endeavor because the lagoons here are too shallow for these British ships. So they had to unload this cannon onto a boat, go into the creek, navigate through the channels and mangroves and swamps before they could land the cannon at a place, and it took them several days to move this cannon into a position below the fort to shoot against the fort. And while all other cannons had no prevail, they were not able to shoot the fort. These big cannons, these only big cannons the British had, was strong enough to really come up to this fortification. And then the people who had defended this position saw that they have no chance and gave up after several days of resistance. So DHAYAH Fort was the last point of resistance against the British attack in 1819 and 1820. So DHAYAH Fort is a relatively simple construction. It's an oval mountaintop with defense walls and then two towers at the opposite ends. Everything built from mud bricks, because here in this area there was enough mud bricks and it would have been very difficult to bring all the stones up to build these buildings from stone. This was never meant as a fortification for a long-term settlement and for any long-term siege, because one thing is missing up here, and that's water. So we have to imagine that there has been water here in the past, but every single drop of water had to be brought up here, and probably was resting in one of the towers in big storage jars, so that when they used this tower, they had some water for the people, for the warriors inside. So this was only meant as a sort of defense point from which you could shoot down any attacker who tried really to overcome the oasis or to plunder the oasis, and also to protect the people and the sheikh and his family and the sewer, which is directly at the foot of the mountain. But this would just be for maybe half a day, 1 day maximum. It was never meant for a longer time. And that's the reason why we do not have any house, any settlement structure up here, because it was not a place for people to live. It was just really built purely for defense purposes. Okay, DHAYAH is not only important because of the unique fort, but because it preserves until now a landscape which is very typical for the northern part of Ras Al Khaimah, but here in a very, very condensed form. One of the reasons why DHAYAH was put on the tentative list of World Heritage, not only because of its historical importance and the archaeological remains, but also because of the landscape, which reflects what was possible in Ras Al Khaimah for the last 5,000 years. And this is, when you look in the seaside, you see the lagoon. This is one of many lagoons in Ras Al Khaimah with a sandbank in front of it. And in the lagoon you can see the mangroves, which were very, very important even in the past for the people to exploit because of their shells, because of the rich fish. From the mangroves and the mangrove swamps we come to the palm gardens, which are still unique and well preserved in DHAYAH. And actually with DHAYAH Fort, this is the only place in the UAE where you really can look down directly on palm gardens, as they have been here for the last 5,000 years, probably without big differences. The same place was used for palm gardens 5,000 years. But that's not all, because when you look to the other side, you see that we're coming directly to the foot of the Musandam mountain chain. And the mountains here in DHAYAH rise up more than 800 meters, directly behind DHAYAH Fort. Which is also important because all the rain which is running against these mountains is trapped and brought back again and gives water, which is here today and still watering the palm trees in the DHAYAH palm gardens. And inside this mountain area, not far away, reachable by foot and used by the same people who use the palm gardens, are terrace fields, which are so typical for the Musandam Peninsula. Places where people were able to grow wheat and barley at a higher level and not at the really very, very humid area of the palm gardens. And so you can see the first of these terrace fields, which are so typical for the Musandam Peninsula, and which were used by the same people who also worked in the palm gardens. And even more, there are two villages, stone villages, hidden behind. One is more or less on a plateau above the wadi, and the other one is really directly at the flank of the mountains, easily to defend, which were built in the 16th and 17th century when times were really very, very unsecure and people were afraid of their lives in the palm gardens because of possible pirate attacks. And so they moved their people into these villages, not more than 20 minutes to walk or half an hour to walk into their palm gardens, so really not very far away, but in easily defendable places. All this combination of stone villages, terrace fields, palm gardens, mangroves and a creek, plus a sandbank is really quite unique in this condensed form in only about a reach of 3 or 4 kilometers. From here you can see the lower fort of DHAYAH, which is a mud brick fort, and at the same time it was the residence of the ruler of DHAYAH, of the Sheikh of DHAYAH. The remains of one tower, a rectangular tower with a living room in the upper floor, is still visible. Another one is quite broken down, but there were two of it. But you have a large empty courtyard because this fortification was also used as a sur, as a fortified compound for all the people from DHAYAH to flee into this compound in times of danger. When you look down here, you see on the left side the round tower, and on the right side a rectangular tower with 2 windows. And this has been probably a majlis or living room of the Sheikh's residence. But you can see the square fortification. On the opposite side you can see the remains of another rectangular tower, which might have been another living room. And we reconstruct another round tower at the opposite side to the round tower, which is still existing.